It's been 6 months since I've updated you all on the progress of Milo. In the last video, I showed you my process of illustrating enemies to fill my game world. A lot has been done since then, and I'm excited to share with you all the progress that's been made over the summer. I'm inching ever so close to finishing the demo for you all to play, and I can't wait for you to try it. So last year, I made a plan to complete this game demo by May of this year. This is very helpful for me as a solo developer to stay on task and meet achievable goals. I mapped out an outline of what was needed to complete the demo, but as I marked something off the list, I added 2 more things. It was getting overwhelming, and many times I wanted to throw in the towel. But I knew if I gave up now, I would never finish this game, so I told myself to stop whining, and keep going. Though it's later than my original goal, I'm proud that I've worked through the majority of the tasks, and I'm getting close to completion. After illustrating some enemies, I decided to start scripting their behaviors. I'm using Unity's built-in visual scripting, formerly known as Bolt, for a lot of the scripting in Milo. So to get started, I wanted to define a few types of enemy behaviors. Simple enemies that chase the player, enemies that chase then attack, ranged, and flying. I've only scripted 2 types, and so far they have worked well as a basis for most of the enemies. I basically took inspiration from a few lessons I followed online and made some tweaks to fit my needs. They're essentially made up of simple states for idling, chasing, and attacking, as well as states for taking damage and dying. I also adapted and modified the health script for my player character, which made it really easy to start up and test. This is what I love about visual scripting. As a beginner game developer, I find it very helpful to separate different behaviors and states. I tried to understand how this works in C#, but constantly I was getting my wires crossed, trying to keep track of all the scripts talking to each other. So then comes my favorite part, animating. For each enemy, I attempted to give it motion relative to its character. For these creatures, they have these claw-like legs and are close to the ground, so I'm making them move sort of like a bug. And for these creatures, I wanted to give it sort of a stiff, crackling movements, because it's made of wood. It's subtle, but I spent a lot of time researching from real-world examples to get this result. For each enemy, I set 5 basic animations: idle, walk, chase, hurt, and dead. I spent a lot of time fine-tuning things like the knockback and damage effects and other reactions, more time than I really should. My goal is to really give the player a satisfying experience when they encounter enemies in Milo, so I want to make combat feel fluid and fun. There are a few more things I have in mind to add to combat, which I hope to get to before the demo's finished. Next, I worked on adding some breakables to the game. You know, crates, barrels, and pots, for starters. Because when you're playing a game with a weapon, you gotta have things to smash, right? I made some of these as platforms so the player can walk and interact with them. Once again, I set up these breakable objects as a prefab template in order to easily adapt new breakables in the game. Like these cave crystals, for instance. Or cutting the grass. Breakables are so much fun. From there, I began to work on an inventory window. I knew I wanted something that would display upgrades and quest items showing progress. I started with the assets I had to activate the inventory with a button press, which would pause the game and open up a simple UI window. And then for the style, I began researching some of the inventory screens I liked, and adapt my own style to them. However, I started to realize an issue I needed to solve sooner rather than later. The question is, how many upgrades are going to be added to the game? How many items and item types will be picked up, and what will they be used for? It's no secret that I draw a lot of inspiration from the Zelda franchise, particularly from the 80s era. I want to follow that formula of acquiring special items and equipment, which you can use to access more areas to progress in the game, with my own twist of course. However, at this stage, I have not yet nailed down what those items will be, or if I'll even be able to incorporate this feature, given my personal limitations as a solo developer. I could work on this thing forever and never release it. So for now, I settled on this look. I implemented the art into the game, setting some sound effects and adding animations to the selector. I have added some tweaks here and there as I work on other parts of the game, which I think improves the overall UI experience. I do find it difficult to make sense of all the moving parts and coordinate what happens during gameplay with what appears in the UI. I could certainly spend more time studying how Unity's canvas and event system works. I also ran into another problem. The inventory window I imagined would have slow moving particles moving in the background. After much trial and error, I discovered that you can't show particles on the canvas in Unity, at least not without a workaround. From the research I found, you need to add another camera that renders only the particles or something like that. It was kind of confusing to me at the time, so I just put it on the shelf and moved on. I also wanted to work on the UI for when the player acquires an item in the game. So when the player opens a chest or acquires an item, pop! It's like an achievement. You know that moment when you know you acquired something really cool. My goal is to pause the action or gameplay so that the player can focus on what's happening. So first, I worked on the pop-up graphic. I wanted to set it up in a modular way with just one object in the canvas being activated, so that when the player opens a chest, the data is sent to that game object's scripts and replaces the object sprite and text. Next, I wanted to give a brief pause to the player input so that he stands in celebration having obtained a new item. I did this with a simple state added to the player's state machine. This again is why I appreciate visual scripting, because I can easily switch the player into another state briefly and quickly and see it put together. Alright, so for the sake of keeping this video from running on, I'm going to end it here. I have a lot more to cover, so look forward to my next devlog where I'll be mostly covering my level building process. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more, and follow the progress of Milo, Tale of the Elder Seed development.